backstory. I live in a small southern city with a history dating back to the Civil War. The apartment building I call home and have called home for almost 4 years now was built in 1936 to be apartments, instead of existing as a house first, only to be then converted into apartments. The walls and floors of this place are tremendously paper thin, as I can hear my downstairs neighbor's TV and my downstairs neighbor's if she's talking loud enough. There's squirrels in the walls that I can hear scrambling from time to time, and I can hear every time the front door opens and shuts, generally because people slam it. I say all this to say, yes, I know there's additional, rational, logical explanations for all sorts of things. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the heavy footsteps I sometimes hear in my downstairs neighbor's apartment, which sounds like she's put the heaviest pair of hiking boots on, which I'd be surprised if she owns, and then paces, doing her best to stomp heavily with every step. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for the knocking I'll hear sometimes on the bathroom wall, which sounds very much like my other neighbor is racking his knuckles against his side of the wall. I'm even sure there's a logical explanation for the shadow of an arm I saw in my dark kitchen once and only back in 2020. I was staring at it from the living room. I'm sure there's a logical explanation for any and all little creepy things that have happened while I've lived here. I can find no explanation for this next part. This was about a week ago. I was about to go to sleep, sitting on the couch. I sleep on my couch because the living room is the only room I can somewhat climate control, be it through heater or fans. I was playing some solitaire to sort of relax. It was a particularly noisy evening that night. The train was whistling and groaning as it made its way down the tracks. The squirrels were scrabbling in the walls, and I could hear my neighbors moving around. In truth, I was a little unnerved by all the noise. But then, in the midst of everything else, I hear it. Uh-oh. It was a small voice, toneless, either a young woman or a child. It wasn't muffled. Didn't sound like it was coming from the TV or from one of the neighbors. It sounded like it was coming from the kitchen or my bedroom. I stopped, paralyzed, listening, and hear nothing. Ever since then, I've heard nothing else, and no explanation for it. There's no grand ghost story attached to this place. The only thing that comes close, a half-remembered story from the old landlord about some little girl going missing here at some point. Even he hadn't heard about it himself. He'd only heard about it from a woman doing research for a ghost walk. It could be nothing, and I probably won't ever hear anything else, just like the Civil War nurse at my college. But I know what I heard. I know what it wasn't, even if I don't know what it was. That's what counts, right? A little while ago, I posted about hearing a girl or a young woman utter the words, "uh-oh," one night in my apartment where I live alone. Since then, I've started compiling a list of weird things that have happened in the apartment. I thought I might go over what's happened in my apartment since I moved in and see what other people think. It really started back in 2021. I'd moved into the apartment in late 2019, and for a year and a half I'd lived there. I hadn't noticed anything very strange, or at least anything strange enough that stuck in my mind. This would change very shortly. While I was hanging out with some friends in a Discord voice chat one afternoon, I happened to glance down the length of my hallway, the doorway of which is to the left of where I sit. Just by turning my head, I can look down the hallway into the dining room, and from the dining room, I can see my desk. Well, when I looked to my left that particular afternoon, I saw what looked like the shadow of a woman's arm in the doorway of the dining room, as if the woman it was connected to was standing just on the inside of the dining room, out of sight. Now, it might have just been the shadows, but I know I saw it clearly enough that it caught my attention, and it was still there after I looked away once or twice. It was clear enough that I was about to tell the Discord chat about it, but it finally disappeared, and I convinced myself I hadn't seen anything. A few months later, sometime around November 2021, February 2022, I was woken up one night to what I can only describe as a choir singing. It sounded like All the World, and as if people were singing it in my room. Now, there is a church next door, but I've never heard them practice before, and this was like 3 a.m. I lay there, fully awake and confused, until the noise finally stopped, and I once again convinced myself that I'd imagined it, that it was only a very late-night practice for the church next door. Now this one, over a year later, earlier this year, I was sitting on the couch in the living room, playing some solitaire on my phone, preparing to go to bed. As I'm sitting there, fully awake and aware of all the noises around me, mainly the train that had just rumbled its way through town, I hear in the silence that followed a young woman or child's voice, clear as day, saying, "Uh-oh," from the direction of the dining room. Now I've heard other people's TVs from the apartment. They're all muffled and quiet. This wasn't. This was clear and loud. A couple of weeks after that, I'm in the dining room, bent over, grabbing a couple of water bottles from the cask in the corner of the room. I catch movement out of the corner of my eye. I watch from between my legs as something, a lady's skirt maybe, moves from one corner of the room to the other. Again. This isn't me seeing something I thought I saw and then wasn't there when I went to look. I watched as whatever this was moved across the floor for several seconds. Why I never thought to stand up and turn around, I'll never know. Finally, just last night, I was listening to someone on YouTube talk about film in the 1980s, when suddenly, along with the audio from the video, I heard something that sounded like a woman's wordless, barely audible, whispering right by my left ear. I stopped. I frowned, rewound the video to where I'd just heard it, and it simply wasn't there. Wasn't in the video. Had never been in the video. I'm becoming more and more convinced that my apartment is haunted, but I'm still not 100% certain that it is. I guess I'd have to concretely engage with something before I believed it. What do you good people think?